Happy Tuesday, and I'm extremely ecstatic for our guest today. She has a ton of knowledge, compassion, some pretty good humor to bring to the table here about how we kind of handle some of the dynamics of caregiving, whether professional or family. And as we know, caregiving can be stressful, and a lot of times we don't take care of ourselves. So with that, I want Miss Breeda Miller to introduce herself and share a little bit about what she does.
Well, hey there, Francis. Thank you so much for having me join you and your listeners today. I like to say that I'm a recovering caregiver. I was an accidental caregiver. I was the default caregiver. 1 daughter and 4 brothers, say no more. And my mom, she, just had a series of unfortunate events and wasn't able to live on her own. And so she moved in with us. And it was just I didn't know what I didn't know, but I loved my mom.
Absolutely. I mean, I think caregiving comes from the heart, right? And,
yes.
And so can you kind of walk me down that path a little bit of what is it like to just be thrown into the hurdle of being an unexpected caregiver?
Yeah, here's an interesting example that I realized years later that I share with folks all the time. When my children were toddlers, I would meet with other moms and we would talk naturally and easily about, so how's that potty training going? Yeah, I'm bribing them with M&Ms every day. Or yeah, we got through the night. Or yep, pull-ups are really working. Or no, I'm going totally cloth. All those kinds of things. We'd have those conversations, right? So when my mom became incontinent, and was having all these challenges, no one has ever said to me, so how's your mom doing? Are you using Depends yet? How's that going? And it was a conversation that is never had. I felt so isolated. People are either embarrassed or they just don't know what goes on in other people's homes when they're caring for loved ones. And they don't talk about it and they don't share it. And it makes it that much harder because then when you finally bring it up to the doctor or you finally reach out and ask someone and you realize, you mean I could have been doing this 6 months ago and I wouldn't be doing 10 loads of wash every day or my couch would still be okay. And so we don't talk about it. It was a time when I felt more frustrated, exhausted, and isolated than I've ever felt in my life. And so I've made it my mission in life to help other people not feel that way.
And I think that is so well said. It's interesting when you're a family member and the roles get reversed. And all of a sudden you're making decisions for your parent or your spouse that you're like, what? I have to do that now, but I'm not ready to do those things.
Yeah, I never felt like I was ready. But one thing I did make up my mind about, Francis, and it was easier for me, maybe, because my mom was a pretty sweet person most of the time. She was not one of these really cranky, nasty folks that I hear, that is so heartbreaking for caregivers who are giving it their all and really not receiving any acknowledgement or appreciation or a tremendous amount of pushback from family members. And those situations are totally there. So I was grateful about that. But the decision that I made was that I wanted to do whatever I could to maintain my mom's dignity. And that helped guide me about the decisions that I would make, the words that I would use. Like, for example, I don't believe that... That's my director of marketing. Sorry.
There you go. Yes.
I don't believe that anyone over the age of 3 should be referred to as wearing diapers. Okay.
I agree.
It is not helpful. It makes people feel ashamed and diminished. So I never use that word, and I called them disposable underwear. And it's a mouthful, a lot of syllables. But you know what? I never wanted my mom just to feel diminished and bad about that. And when the time came that I needed to find a transport wheelchair, the way I put it to Mom was, Mom, there's an exhibit coming up at the Detroit Institute of Arts, and I would love to take you, but I just don't think you're going to be able to walk that far. And what do you think if we got one of these little travel wheelchairs so that I could take you to these places? And she said, oh, that would be a great idea. So it was all about something that was going to allow her to do something she wanted to do.
Mhm.
It was going to make my life a lot easier. We were going to be, because she was really slow.
Yeah. I know. It's
And by,
approach,
by
though.
the way, when I went to look for a wheelchair,
Mhm.
there's too much gray going on in senior care, between their hair and their skin, but we don't need all of the walkers and everything else to be totally gray.
Yeah.
So I found this really cool plaid transport wheelchair.
Oh.
And it was not a Burberry plaid, but it was not unlike a Burberry plaid. And so she had a matching scarf. And when we would be out and about, people would come up to her and say, "Oh, you have such a lovely wheelchair." And she would be so proud. And she'd say, "Oh, thank you. My daughter bought it for me."
That's awesome. Well, I think what you're saying, though, is it's about the approach.
Yeah.
It's not about this idea of, well, this is all we had. You could have gone the path of least resistance, right? And just said, you know what, I'm going to find a black wheelchair and we're done with it. We're done. But I think what I love about what you did there is you said, no, this is not something we're settling for. This is something we're working towards, right? We want this bright colored wheelchair. We want something that has some pizzazz to it, right? And
it was going to allow us to it was going to allow her to have a better quality of life by having this assistance rather than looking at as, oh, I'm really gone downhill now. I need a wheelchair.
Because I think too often with some of our older adults, we get this idea, or they get this idea that they move into a senior care residence or they move into or need assistance at home. They think life stops.
Yes.
And somehow we have to break this stigma that life doesn't end when this starts. It is a new chapter, a new whatever, that you can still go to the museum, you can still go to the park, you can still go to the mall or the stores or whatever it is. And we have to go back to that vigor of life doesn't stop as you age. We just need to get a little more creative on how you get there.
You have to be creative, resourceful, and be willing to adapt.
Yes.
And so whether that's your behavior, the activities you choose to do, the way you do them, and you can't get hung up on, well, we used to be able to do this, or I always used to do that, and now, you know what? Yes, this is true, but now we're doing things differently, and it is the new way to do it. And also your language and your demeanor. If you're resentful, if you are cranky, mostly my guess is it's because you're exhausted.
Yes.
So my superpower is taking a nap. It really is. If you can find a way to take a nap, it will make all the difference in the world.
I think it's a really good springboard into, because you're a professional speaker, right? I mean, you're there to be a resource for caregivers. And I want to bring your site up here. Can you kind of talk about, because I really found you from your coffee breaks. That's what really got me turned on to you, was like, I'm like, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like you give caregivers, especially families, permission to take a break.
Absolutely. In fact, I said this one time. I was making a presentation. I said, it's about taking a break before you break. And I just think that way. And then so many people came up to me and said, yes, that's it. And it's about being preemptive. Like, don't wait till you're a wreck. Don't wait till you are over the edge, cranky, making bad decisions, being resentful.
Right.
Don't wait for that. Be proactive and take care of yourself. And I have to say, while caregivers are wonderful, kind, loving people who care for others, they are the worst at taking care of themselves.
I say they're givers. I mean, caregivers literally give everything of themselves, and they forget about the
or they feel guilty. We feel guilty, or we feel, oh, it's so selfish. Mom can't go to the movies. How can I go out with my friends? Mom's at home, and I just can't do that. No. You need to recharge your batteries, whatever that looks like for you. For some people, bless their hearts, it's going for a run. Trust me, that's not me. maybe it's going for a walk, right? Or maybe it's going to TJ Maxx for an hour. In fact, I remember going, I love to shop around. And I remember one time making the mistake I was in town and I mentioned to Mom that I popped in there, and she was like, oh, I would have loved to have gone. And I thought, I was already in town. It was an hour away. I couldn't come home and get you and then go.
Right.
So I just learned to kind of zip my lip when I was able to do something like that.
Yeah.
But maybe it's going to the library. Maybe it's having a massage once a month. Maybe it is just going outside on a porch and having a cup of coffee and being mindful about that and not just slugging it down, but
Right.
even just taking 10 minutes to feel it, to drink it, to just be by yourself.
Right. And can I ask, when you do that, what is the sense that you feel when you take that self-care break, whether it's a 5-minute break, a 10-minute break? How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel human. It makes me feel less resentful when I'm really tired. And I think, you know what? This is my time. And you know what? Wouldn't it be great if it was a whole day? Wouldn't it be great if it was a couple of hours? But many times for caregivers, we're lucky if we can get 15 minutes. You know, when my son was a toddler, he couldn't say peace and quiet, but I know he heard me say it all the time because he said one time, "Mom, we need some peace and quiet."
Yep.
So you just need to give yourself some peace and quiet, however long or short that is, and do it. Have it to look forward to. So when you're in the middle of, cleaning up more bodily fluids than you thought a human being could ever create, and you're just like, but you know what? At 3:15, I'm going to watch an episode of Friends on YouTube, or I'm going to go for a walk for 10 minutes outside by myself.
Yep. I think that's fantastic. And I think what I want our listeners to hear is it doesn't need to be long. It can start 5-10 minutes, right? It can start just enough to have almost that self-respect. I mean, give yourself that self-care that you
You're worth
deserve.
it. You're totally worth it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important message because I know with my own mom, there's the guilt factor. She has guilt for not being with her kids or grandkids, guilt for not being with her mom. It's mom guilt to the max. And, I remember even the first time we moved my grandmother to an independent living with help with some daily caregiving coming in, she felt guilty. I was like, well, I'm like, Mom, but you're fried. She's like, I know, but still. I'm like,
I know, but still, I mean, I like to say, people have heard of the sandwich generation. I lived in the caregiver sandwich for nearly 6 years. And, the sandwich generation on one side is the generation above you that you're responsible for caring for. And the other side is your kids, the younger generation. You were just squeezed in the middle. And then, if you have grandchildren in the mix, then it's a club sandwich.
Yes.
And that's too many carbs. Just too much.
Too many carbs. It's a good way to put it. Especially too many carbs if you don't take some time for yourself.
Yes.
Right? Everyone needs that reprieve. And again, I want to stress this. It doesn't have to be a full day. Full days would be great, but 10 minutes could be amazing.
Because it's not about what's left of you at the end of the day. It's what is you. Let me put it this way. For those who are feeling a hard time letting go of the guilt, letting go of feeling that this is selfish or this is a luxury that you just can't afford. If you are a wreck, you are not going to be your best self, which means that you will probably be short-tempered. You will probably not be able to listen deeply. You will not be able to think clearly because, particularly if you're caring for someone that has dementia, it's like every day is a day at the Improv without the laughter. Because you don't know who's going to walk in the room and where they're going to be at mentally, what era they're going to be living in, or who they think is in the house with them. And you have to have the mental agility to respond in a positive way, to guide them, to keep them safe, to have dignity, but to also not lose your mind in the process. So you need to take care of yourself because you're not going to be any condition to take care of anyone else otherwise.
And I think too, what worries me most about these family caregivers is I want them to have life for whatever's next for them, right? Because we hear in our industry, when I work with families, we sometimes hear that primary caregiver actually is in worse health than the person they're taking care of. And it goes back to, I want them to still have something else after they navigate their world of caregiving.
Absolutely. My mom's physician and I talked about this a lot. And she said, and she was brilliant. She said when the caregiver would come in with their loved one for a doctor's appointment, she would really keep an eye on that caregiver because that's a secondary patient right there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mhm.
I
So
never heard
if
it
we're
put like that,
mindful,
but that makes sense.
if
Yeah.
we're mindful and proactive, it's still hard. It's still really hard. I as I say, I was feeling so frustrated. I was taking care of my mom,
Mhm.
my husband, my 3 teenage children,
Oh, wow.
2 dogs, and I had a home office. I had a job in my home. So
Oh,
I had the worst of all worlds because I never got to leave.
yeah.
And all day long, I felt like I was constantly disappointing someone.
Mm. Yeah.
And so these are lessons that I learned firsthand about. I knew it was bad when my 13-year-old said, "Mom, I think you need to take a nap."
Oh, yeah. For your son, for your child to say that, yeah, that says a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
So you've worked on something pretty cool here, pretty unique. So can you kind of share in this next little realm that you're moving into?
Yeah. Oh, Francis, I'm telling you, sometimes I don't know. I have reached a point in my life where I am doing the thing that I think I was born to do.
Mhm.
I have written a play.
That's
And when
so
I'm a storyteller, I've been on the Moth on NPR and told
Mhm.
stories about my mom. And I
Mhm.
found that when I want to share my experiences with other family and professional caregivers,
Mhm.
it's the power of story that helps them connect and remember the message.
Mm.
So rather than just saying, here's the thing to do and 1, 2, 3, but here's what happened to me. Here's the story that might be funny, will touch your heart, but most importantly, will be memorable.
Mm.
And so I have written a play, and it's solo performance, so it's just me. And I
Wow.
play 4 characters. I play,
Cool.
and my background is in theater too. In fact, I
Okay.
I won an acting scholarship to university, and I decided not to pursue it as a career because I wanted to have a normal life. I wanted to have a
Yeah.
family. I didn't think normal meant also being a caregiver while I had my kids, but never mind.
I think that's yeah.
But anyway, it's called Mrs. Kelly's Journey Home, and it's a story of my mom, my family's immigration from Ireland,
Okay.
them becoming Americans, which shenanigans ensued, and then my journey. As I was very sick when I was a child, which led to infertility and then international adoption for 3 kids. So it was kind of the full circle. My parents are immigrants, as are my brothers, and my children are immigrants.
That's pretty
But
cool.
then the role of switching everything into being my mother's caregiver, and she had congestive heart failure, which led to vascular dementia.
Mhm.
And I have to tell you, when I speak to folks who are not caregivers, or who are newly, putting their toes in this role because they love the person in their life who needs care, and they don't know what the resources are out there, and it's just overwhelming. But the purpose of this play is to educate people, to inform them, to help them learn to be creative, to be compassionate, and also to for non-caregivers to understand. People still are confused about the terms. Like dementia, is an umbrella term. It
Right.
covers a lot, and there's a lot of different kinds of dementia. And I like to tell folks they're all different, but they're all heartbreaking,
Yes.
and it's very, very difficult. And if you don't know some wonderful techniques, you and I know about Teepa Snow's work, and
Mhm.
about the positive approach to caregiving, which is
Mhm.
so powerful. But if you don't know that, it doesn't come naturally, because the person that you're caring for is not the same. They're not the same individual that you've known for years and years and years. And if you don't recognize that and find ways to treat them with respect and dignity,
Mhm.
it's just going to be so much harder than it is anyway. But there is hope. There are resources. There's
Mhm.
people now like Francis, and there's so many resources. But you have to step outside your house and put the hand out, raise your hand, research things, find out what's there, and
Mhm.
and realize you don't have to do this all by yourself.
I think that's well said. But I want to go back to something that's kind of interesting is
Yeah.
you didn't want to go to acting as a career, but you ended up in acting to share this incredible story. And I give you a lot of credit for that because I think making this more mainstream, where it's talked about, where it's supported, goes so much further for families and those in this role that feel isolated. So I literally think it's beautiful. And I cannot thank you enough for bringing it to the forefront, because too often you're in the shadows and it's an afterthought. And one thing that I've tried to start in Colorado is dementia friendly night out, because my biggest heartbreak was when I talk to spouses and go, oh, I'm afraid to leave the house. I'm like, why? Oh, what if my wife does something that isn't okay? I'm like, so? Yeah, but what if people look? I go, so? I mean, and so what we did is we wanted to create a space that if someone decides to eat with their hands or play with the water, it's okay, because everyone's in that same role. Because it started to break my heart when I heard they haven't left much, or they haven't had a life of their own. And so I think we have to make it mainstream. And so I applaud for what you're doing. I think it's phenomenal.
It is. Thank you so much, Francis. It is about awareness and education. And I think that through this play, because it's funny, you know, it is pretty funny. And people say, well, Breeda, how much of this is really true? I said, 100%. Really, it's true. And they don't, because I really could not make some of this stuff up.
I'm sure, yes.
But if you say it with a smile, and there's so much love in it. And it is so heartbreaking, but people, it is authentic, and they know that I'm not just putting it on or saying something to hug the heartstrings. In fact, there's a lot, as you can imagine, that I left out because it's so hard. But the other thing that I'm excited about is the model that I'm using to get this out there. I mean, would I, if someone called me and said, Breeda, would you be available to appear on Broadway? Yeah, probably. But that's not my goal. That's not what I'm judging as a success. What I'm really hoping is that we're doing the world premiere in October. So it's still in development, and it's still really, I've had some readings and the response has been tremendous. But really what I'm hoping for is this will be a great tool, a fundraising tool for nonprofits, for people who serve older adults, whether it is dementia, or anybody who is in the position of being a caregiver, whether it's helping children, that this would be the perfect vehicle to bring me in, to have a theater. We could do a VIP, area of, reception, sell the tickets. And then afterwards, we could do a talk back. We could do a meet and greet, that kind of thing. And
that's fantastic.
Sponsors could be involved. Now, I'm not, in my other life, I did some fundraising, so I am not saying I'm going to help you on this part. But God bless you if you want to do a silent auction and raise money and do that. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that model, though, because what I always find interesting is when we hear these stories, there's still that more of like, okay, what do I do in this situation? Right? I'm sure you get that a lot. Like, oh, that was great, but what do I do here? What do I do here? And I love that idea of, one, the way to raise some money, and two, I think the way to have a back and forth where you're passing more knowledge on that can hopefully be used to better that day, that life, that person. So that's awesome. That I'm excited to kind of see how it goes. And for your world premiere, you'll have to, let us know more details so we can share that when those things get buttoned up.
Trust me, I would love to. You won't have to ask twice.
That's awesome. So I kind of want to go into something that's always important for us is who's a maverick in your life? It's just really important for us to bring this up, because I think it's an important answer and question. Yeah,
totally, 100%. My mother, because let's face it, I wrote a play about her. Mrs. Kelly is the star of the show. She's in heaven looking down on us, and I'm telling you, she's delighted. In fact, so when she was, when I was her caregiver, I was in some local theater plays, and it was one of the ways that I took care of myself, because for 6 weeks I was in a show, and I had just a really small part, but it meant, okay, guys, see ya, bye. And I left the house for rehearsals. And my husband and my kids took care of my mom, so she wasn't on her own. I had that luxury. But when I went there, it was just for me. It wasn't learning a skill. It wasn't anything taking care of anybody else. It was this little family of the cast and the crew. And after 6 weeks, we had 1 weekend of performance and it was done. But the thing was, my mom was very proud of this. And she would say to me, when people would come for a visit, they'd say, "Oh, Breeda, she's a great actress. Do you know she gets every part she auditions for?"
That's awesome.
And I'm embarrassed. I'm like, "Well, Mom, I only tell you about the ones I get. I don't." Right. And then the other cool thing is, the road from where I live is the actor Jeff Daniels has a local playhouse in Chelsea called the Purple Rose Theater, and they do fabulous professional work there, and they're great. And I've been to some workshops and things. And honest, Mom said to me one day, "You know, Breeda, you should call that Jeff Daniels and tell him you're available."
That's awesome.
Because he needs to know that.
Yeah, that is so cool. Speaking of your mom, so they immigrated from Ireland. When did she come over?
In 1957, they emigrated with my 3 brothers. And really the whole show is how courageous and how brave they were. My father was a printer, and Ireland in the 1950s was not very good, and they wanted a better future for their boys, and so they knew no one in this country. They knew nothing. And he got a job at the Detroit Free Press and sent for my mom and my brothers, and they moved here. And one of the stories I tell is that they had gotten a television set in Ireland, and my brother's favorite were the American Westerns, and they couldn't wait to see the Wild West, right? In Detroit. And my mom said that when they were in the taxi cab leaving Metro Airport to get to the little house my dad had rented, my brothers had their noses pressed against the windows saying, "Where are the cowboys? Where are the cowboys?"
Wow, that's cool.
So that's what the show is all about. It's personal storyline and how we get to where we ended up, and it's powerful and it's fun, and I think it really will serve a need that so many people have right now.
Absolutely. My great grandma Green actually immigrated to Ellis Island in 1918 during the Great Potato Famine. So that says a lot about the tenacity and the toughness of that generation to just pick up and go.
The courage.
I think she was 17 or 18 at the time. She came with her sisters and her brothers, and that was it. I was like, yeah, that just is mind blowing. And I give your parents a lot of credit for that toughness, because it could not have been easy, to say the least.
We think it's a big deal to move to another state, right?
No, I just love how with your play, you're taking through that little journey, right? And I think it's really cool to show that there's more to this person than their diagnoses. And I think that's what's really important.
Boy, you hit the nail on the head. So when you see this frail 90-year-old person or 85-year-old person, that maybe you'll remember the story about Mrs. Kelly's journey and all that she went through. And this is where she is now. And it's all about honoring people and really recognizing the whole person and their history, and about dignity and care. And the other really important point about dignity and care is it benefits both of you. I don't have regrets, because I know the way that I cared for my mom. It was not perfect. There were days that I wish I could do a rewind and I could have done better. Those are the days I needed a nap. Anyway, that always keeping her dignity in mind meant every single day I just did the best I could at that moment. And when you know better, you do better, as Maya Angelou said, right?
Absolutely.
But it's all about learning and being open to it. And I hope that my work from my website, there's lots of videos and stories and blog posts and things that people tell me it really helps them. In fact, so my name is Breeda, and I had a friend who said that one night her dad was not asleep and she couldn't watch television, and she just decided to watch some of my videos, and she said, "I need a Breeda."
Yeah, that's cool. So with that being said, what action do you want our listeners to take, our viewers, listeners to take?
Well, on my website, there is a newsletter. And if you like to keep up with my goings on. If you sign up for it, I send a blog post irregularly. Okay. Maybe once a month if I'm good.
Yep.
But as I get closer to the show, it's probably a little bit more. And my hope is, right now I'm sharing the process, which is fabulous, about having the readings and my director and where we're going and the choices we're making. And I'll be announcing the actual show dates and information about the world premiere. And then there's a lot of organizations who are already interested for 2022 saying, we need to raise money. We who doesn't? But we really need to raise money. And we're kind of, what we've been doing is getting kind of old and tired. This is cool. This is different. Yeah. We think people would come. And, I have, as I say, I have a lot of experience in it, and I'll be happy to work with organizations and help them make decisions so that it is successful.
Will you travel out of state?
Oh,
will you travel?
Okay. I have my passport, Francis. Okay. I am ready. I have friends in the UK. I have all my cousins in Ireland, and I have told them that's the plan. So no, we want to go everywhere.
Cool. No, I think I just, I'm sitting here as we're talking, and this is going to resonate so well. We're going to learn so much from it, and it's going to give people, I think, a chance to realize that just because someone has that diagnosis today, it doesn't take away from who they are or who they will be. Yeah, is it a challenge? Absolutely. Yeah. But that doesn't mean
come out the other side.
Exactly.
And the other interesting thing, I'm so glad you bring this up, is that the diagnosis and this behavior is part of who this person is, right, but not the whole. And this show is not a show entirely about dementia and caregiving. That's an important part of it, but it's not the whole thing. And so you're not going to get hit over the head by it. There's really touching parts that, your eyes might leak. I'm going to warn you, bring some tissues. But I think you're going to laugh a lot. I know you're going to laugh. And I have a blast doing it. So I'm thinking it's going to be very accessible, and even people who are not in a role of caregiving, those people are going to really love it and relate to it. But other folks are going to have an appreciation for the caregivers in their life by experiencing this play.
And I also think too, for some of our medical professionals, it'd be good for them to get a sense of what it is like, because I know I'm hammering this point, but I am so tired of people being a dementia resident, a dementia patient, patient. They're a person living with whatever they're living with, because we all have our issues that we're living with, whether we want to admit it or not. And it is part of who you are. It is not, like you said it best, it is not all of who you are. And so I want our listeners to remember, there are bright spots still when someone has a diagnosis. There's bright spots to look for, those window moments, I like to call them. So be mindful of those and give yourself some self-care. And I just want to say, Breeda, I applaud what you're doing. I want to say thank you for taking time to share your story with me. I have an utmost respect for what you do and for the wonderful work that you've provided. So thank you for being here.
The feeling is mutual, Francis. I certainly feel that way about your work as well. And this podcast is terrific. I hope people view it as a tremendous resource, because that's what we need to do. Find the resources, find the help. Don't be shy.
Absolutely not. And with that, I want to say we are hosting an event September 16th and 17th in Denver, Colorado. So check us out, collaborationinaging.com. We are constantly sharing new information. It is going to be a wild approach to an actual event. There we have a village for our viewers that you're going to navigate through as a family member. You're going to get different cards, and it's going to be a little confusing, unsettling. So for our professionals, we're going to make you wear different hats to better understand what some of our families go through. So September 16th and 17th in Denver, Colorado. And Breeda, appreciate you as always. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you.
Thank you.